Hello and welcome to the Dog Savant Podcast. My name is Brett Endies. I'm a professional dog trainer. This podcast is for you if you are a dog or puppy owner seeking training and behavior advice. If you're a client in the real world looking to supplement the work we are doing with more information. And if you're just anyone interested in dog training, dog behavior, and the life of a professional dog trainer, this podcast is for you. This episode is 110. And I always ask, please don't forget, take the time to share, like, review, subscribe, tell a friend, tell me. You can send me questions, dogtrainingla@gmail.com. It really is my motivation for both doing this, and it helps other people find this podcast. I've been doing it now for, I'd say like 4 years. It's, off and on, as you know, the episodes don't come out consistently at this point. I hopefully will do that more if there's more people giving me feedback and seeing that actually it is falling on ears. But until then, please help. I know people have commented that the podcast has helped them and they enjoy it, so others can do the same if you let them know about it. Okay, enough of the sales pitch. Let's go on to today's order of business. I'm going to talk about traveling with your dog. I don't think I've really touched on that, at least in podcasts. I do go through this with clients. And the reason why is I'm here on the road. I'm with Miss Minnie, my little Yorkie girl. We're headed to Colorado to visit my daughter. And I just figured I'd give some tips while I got the time here in the car, and also just some things that can really help you enjoy your time with your dog if you're traveling, and keep everything safe, happy. And a lot of people, they just don't get out there with their dog because they just don't know what to do with their dogs. If the dogs have issues or don't listen, or they don't know how to leave their dogs alone in a hotel, or things like that. So let's go through some scenarios. We'll talk about car travel, we'll talk about airline travel, we'll talk about even a lot of my clients, they do RVing, right? That's camping, right? These are all ways that you're going to be leaving your everyday surroundings with your dog, and being able to apply some of the skills that hopefully you will or have been working on with your dog that can then carry over to these new situations. So let's just talk about right here. I'm traveling in the car, and this the car part of this is going to go for even if you're just taking a trip across town. You want to be safe. Okay, so for dogs, it really is not the best idea for them to be in the front seat for a couple reasons. Number one, dogs that aren't able to relax in the car, it's not going to help matters if they're in the front of the seat, looking out front, getting more stimulated, feeling like they're at the very least your co-pilot. They want to feel like a passenger. So starters, if you have a large dog or a small dog, you can do one of two things. You can either use a crate if you have space in your vehicle towards, if you have an SUV or a car, you put it in the back seat or with a hatch in the back of the SUV. And your dog obviously should have crate skills, be comfortable in the crate. Don't just start crate training your dog and getting them acclimated to it on your first car trip. These are all skills that should be worked on or already developed prior to what I'm going to talk about here for traveling purposes. So that's one way, and that's really easy if your dog relaxes in the crate. It is, and they are safe. They even make crates that are crash test rated. I know Gunner Kennels, and I think there's some other companies that they've actually done the test. And I've heard horror stories here in Las Vegas. There was not too long ago a football player crashed into a poor young woman, and her dog was in the car, and they both passed away. So I mean, I don't think in that case it would have mattered, but in a lot of cases, the rollover crash, the impact, if the kennel isn't intact, the dog has a greater chance of getting harmed. So that is another motivator, but it's also just a way to keep your dog calm, relaxed, and secure mentally when they're traveling, especially for a long trip. Now, you can also do the same with place training. Minnie here, who's such a good little girl, I have her kennel just for if I'm going to stop and leave her in the car when it's not too hot, of course. I know social justice warriors jump on this stuff. Or just if we're in the hotel and I just going to leave for a period of time, it's just more convenient for her to settle the crate. But while we're driving, I like to hang out with her. So she's just laying in the back seat, just sharing the space with me, very calm. She's actually a very relaxed traveler. She's always been this way, from the start. It's just been her thing. So she's a good girl. Yes, if I stop short, she's not secure. That is the only safety risk. And I do recommend, and I am guilty of this, again, social justice warriors don't jump on me, you should use even like a seatbelt harness, because they are safer. If you stop short, your dog is like a seatbelt, secure. But if your dog can't really lay in those situations, I think they make ones that maybe have a tether that your dog can have more range of movement and then be able to lay down. But for the most part, just have your dog calm, physically in one spot, relaxed, not doing a whole lot when you're traveling in the car. And again, whether it be traveling on long trips, short trips, it all applies. Now, this is going to go if you have an RV, if you have like if it's a trailer, no one should be in the back when you're driving. But if it's, like a motor home, I guess they call them, where you're driving and people can be in the back, then the dog should have like a place, just like it would be in the home, like a room, like in your living room, they lay in their spot, or a kennel space in there too. And one other last thing about the kennel, some people do this, and even in the back of a pickup truck, if you have a secure kennel, it's safe as long as you strap it down and make sure that the dog can't escape from it, right? So those are my little last pointers on that part of it. Now, let's say you're traveling by air. Now, I've said my piece on this, and I haven't traveled in a while because of COVID, but nonetheless, I think that if you're going to travel with your dog, service dog, paying for whatever, your dog should be well behaved and familiar with being in spaces like similar, out in public access training, we call it, calm, listening, focused, not being affected by passerbys or any kind of things like food or loud sounds or other dogs, right? Because I've seen dogs fight in airports and on planes because maybe they listen around people, but then a dog passes by, which is going to happen, and now they lose control and it causes the whole thing. So for that, you want to do that also for the consideration of other passengers and people. I just really think it's just a good thing to do if you're going to travel on a plane with your dog. Now, that's again if your dog is large and you're going to have them with you and you're going to have them lay at your feet, or a smaller dog that's going to stay in your lap or in a small travel carrier, but you're going to walk them to and from the seating area in the plane. That's all the way this applies. Now, some people do, and I again, it's my personal thing, right? Here's where the Mr. Neutral Dog Trainer gets a little emotional. I don't feel comfortable sending my dog under carriage, as far as the cargo area. I know nowadays it's so much different. I had a dog that actually had a delay, and I freaked out. I think I was like 19, 20 years old. My dog Pfeiffer I used to have, and I hated the experience. He was fine, but I hated it, right? So just in case of these things, I know they do tend to the dogs. I think for long layaways, they do have a policy where they will get the dogs out and be able to walk them to relieve themselves and make sure they have water and climate control. I've heard wonderful stories. I have one client where her husband's from Italy, so they split their time between the U.S. and Italy, and she travels with her dog often on a plane, and actually the pilot, or one of the crew, I think it was the pilot actually, was down there doing like a pre-flight check and took a picture of her dog in the kennel looking happy, showed it to them and said, your dog's fine, no need to worry, blah, blah. So it goes to that level of being evolved from like, what are we talking, 20, oh gosh, almost 20, almost 30 years ago when I did it. It was probably they were a little less concerned about dogs or passengers' mental state, being concerned about the dogs on traveling planes. Anyway, I digress. So with flying on a plane, again, it's not really too much different than the car. Your dog should be able to lay in one spot, calm, walk calmly to and from the environment, the plane, through the airport, wait on line, sitting at your side calmly, and or be able to stay in a carrier or a secure situation where they can feel relaxed, not have anxiety, and just not be affected by what's going on in the environment, the surroundings. Okay, so now let's talk about when you arrive and you're at a hotel, right? Because a lot of people, once they were in Airbnb, right? Same thing, or a friend's house. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just a new environment. Your dog should have the skill of place training. I can't stress it enough. This is a universal thing that when your dog can have a place with duration, meaning they can go to their place, a spot, a mat, a bed, or even just lay where you tell them to lay and hold that state calmly focused on their down for a duration of time as long as necessary to get through whatever your situation you're in, or to establish like, hey, we're in the new hotel room, instead of over assessing. And I'll tell you a story here why this is important, was important in my personal life. It just gives them, when we're in this new space, this is the desk that I do my job, and I can just focus calmly, and it does create a calm on command effect to make that association, and that's really just a good tool. And I always say you don't have to bring like a giant bed or a training cot. You can just get a little foldable, little portable mat, or the kind they put in a crate, or you can even get an old yoga mat and cut it to the length of your dog laying down and use that, or a little, something that's just comfortable enough for them to lay in for a period of time and defines a space and convenient for you to. They even make portable cots. I have one in the car now that folds up like one of those foldable chairs that you see people at sports events. They'll fold out and they sit on. So they make those actually. The company's eluding me, but if you look up foldable dog cot or bed, you should find something similar. So all these are great. Again, when you're entering a new hotel room, a restaurant, you're traveling, and then also a good heel. Having your dog be able to walk at your side, calm, focused, to and from through hotel lobbies, not reacting to people, other guests. All these things are super, super important so your dog can be under control, calm, happy, enjoyable, socially appropriate, and just appear as somebody who actually is conscious about their dog's behaviors when they're out in public situations. And this again applies not just to travel, it applies to any time you're out with your dog. Okay, so let's see. That's the hotel or Airbnb or once you arrive. So with camping, it's the same thing. A lot of times in that environment, the dog will get overstimulated by other animals, the open environment where they have the space, and I always recommend still creating a spot, even if you're going to just tether them to like a tree or something so they can hang out off to the side while everyone's enjoying their activities, having a place mode. I would say a foldable, type of cot where it really is a specifically defined spot for them to stay put, especially when you first arrive there. All good stuff. Now, you want your dog to enjoy some freedom and you're out hiking. And I talk a lot about this also, simply because I do a lot of outdoor activities with my dogs. And I know this is the reason why my dogs can be able to be off leash, and trustworthy and listen when I need them to in these situations, because I took all the time to use the leash, to do the basic training, to even evolve to here. I was going to say the long leash where your dog, has some freedom, but you can start teaching them there's a limit. They can't just go beyond 20, 30 feet. They always have to check in, and then you start working on recall. So one day you'll actually have that ability for them too, especially if you do this frequently or take the time to practice and proof it in these environments. Again, all these type of scenarios where you're traveling, it does have a common theme. It's your dog being focused on command, not being over affected, using the leash, the tools, the place, spot, whatever it may be. Especially if your dog doesn't have the skills yet, you got to take these opportunities as much as you want to enjoy your traveling and vacation time to teach your dog. So for future, or even for this instance, your dog can have the skills to make it an easier, more enjoyable proposition. The one thing I have to backtrack to that I did forget to talk about is when I said I have a personal situation related to hotel rooms. My dog Boo, he's almost 10 now, the big Rottweiler. If any of you have seen me post him, plenty of times on social media. He, when he was younger, I'd say probably about a year and a half, he was a good boy, but he had some oats to sow. And he did like to mark, only outdoors at the time, and we had an issue where he would mark on young human females at dog parks back when I used to enjoy going to them, and that was corrected. But when we go to a new hotel room, and this happened twice, and I learned my lesson by not getting a security deposit back, when we'd enter, he'd start just sniffing around, assessing, and then he'd lift his leg, and he'd always pee on the corner of the bed in the hotel room, and then he'd settle and be calm. And the first time says, well, maybe it's just like he smelled another dog, whatever. I corrected it and said that's the end of it, maybe. We did it again. Then I said there's an issue. So what did I do? I didn't let him go free in the new hotel room, because that second time I actually got charged for it. It cost me a couple $100 to clean the mattress for them. And I put the bed down. I kept him in the car, went in the room in advance, put the bed down, and then I heeled him to the room. Very calm and focused, so he wasn't getting in this agenda-minded state, and just directly to the place. Do not pass go. You're going immediately to that spot without any extraneous thinking, movements, or assessment. And then that was what I did the next few times I go to hotels. And then what started happening was he'd enter the hotel in a calmer, more focused state without this agenda, and it just prevented the mindset that made him just over assess, and he felt that marking was getting it all under control. So I took control preemptively and we were good to go. So that's like extreme. Hopefully your dog doesn't have that kind of, but if your dog just starts pacing or can't settle or has separation anxiety when you come and go from the hotel room, all good reasons to establish structure before they start getting into this state of mind that's over assessing from the get-go. And if you're consistent, it should just create a norm or a new norm that replaces the bad behavior. I mean, and this is what I just said right now is just the theme for any kind of training, right? It just takes time, effort, consistency, and a little bit of understanding. All right, so one more thing to the podcast here. I'm going to get a little drink, pardon me. It is dry in Nevada. Questions. Yeah, that's right. Let me get this question here. I am driving, so I'm just going to peek here. I made a quick little note, as I always do. Okay. My dog is still peeing in the crate. We've gone through everything related to potty training. We've tried it all. And we've even using a crate that's so small he can barely turn around. And he still, when he gets excited and sees us walk by the crate, he will leak. Funny way to put it. He will pee a little. What can we do? We think he's potty trained, but he still pees in his crate, so we don't know. Well, first I always ask, is this something that your dog's doing not just in the crate? So, for example, if your dog meets someone new, is your dog piddling, or when they pet them when they first meet them, or your dog just starts to get really worked up, or they don't get their way, they start, that means that A, they have a bladder infection, or B, they're really not fully potty trained. They may have a weak bladder. They may have an issue where they can hold it for a period of time or until you get them out for the next bathroom visit, or you leave pee pads down, which I find tends to create a weaker bladder dog, if you will. So I would make sure your dog, if your dog's a year old, your dog should at least be able to hold it 6 hours, 8 hours, in a common day overnight. And if your dog can, let's say your dog can only hold it 4 hours. Well, maybe you start building it up where after 4 hours you put him in a crate for an hour or two to have him hold it. Now, again, the crate might not get them to hold it, because it sounds like this is a bladder overstimulation issue, not just a lack of ability to hold it. If your dog, if I understand correctly, can stay clean in the crate when there's nothing distracting him or her, and getting him stimulated. So I would say the crate has to go in a very calm, sensory-deprived part of the house where the dog isn't going to get feedback or get feedback from the activities going on that would cause that excitement and peeing, right? But it is really the best tool that if your dog can hold it even a little better in the crate than when they're out free or in a pen, or if you take them out frequently, to just extend it an hour or two to get them to like a 6 or 8 hour mark, right? So that's the potty training end of it. And I've done 4, maybe 5 podcasts at this point where I talk about it. So you can go back and prior episodes, and please, you can get a full A to Z on how, you want to approach teaching your dog the right housebreaking skills. Now, your dog may be familiar with pottying in the crate because they were, some dogs come from breeders a little bit later than 8 weeks, and they've just been in like a pen or a crate peeing where they are sleeping, and that's why a crate is supposed to work, because it keeps them, it's a living space where they want to keep it clean and avoid going there, and then they, by instinct will just even amazingly hold it for a long stretch of time, even a young puppy. So, we have to make sure of that, make sure there's no, again, bladder infection or issue that may make it hard for your dog to. But if, again, and please, what I'm saying here, if you're saying, no, my dog just will pee even just by themselves in the middle of the night in the crate, it's not always related to people exciting them, then we might want to talk more. Again, we do probably have to rule out some kind of bladder issue, or maybe your dog is having excessive water intake. Here, as you can tell, I'm just brainstorming a little just to kind of try to troubleshoot a little, not really having the case in front of me. But nonetheless, really, and then also just make sure your dog doesn't have any just issues of just any kind of anxiety, separation issues, or just getting too excited when people come and go, where, the dog's just, the stimulation level is over, the top to beyond normal. Not just happy to see you. Dog just has the FOMO where they got to follow you every time you get up and move, and runs up to you every time you enter the room, and goes nuts when they see new people. All that has to be addressed too for your dog to be what's called balanced minded. and balance-minded dogs tend to not have so many behavioral issues, right? People who have peace and content, the symptoms, the anxieties, the depressions and all that, there is chemical imbalances in people that aren't so prevalent in dogs, animals, but nonetheless, in a lot of cases for people too, people aren't just having a full content life or having their full, everything at the level of being optimum. And then what happens is you get symptoms of, if you want to call it acting out on the deeper rooted issues, as it can be with dogs too. All right, so I think I'm just going off here on a tangent, but I do want to be thorough. I try to paint a good enough picture here on a podcast that I would be saying the same thing word for word to a client, maybe a little extra to try to give you a good visual. Anyway, so a client of mine said I was entertaining yesterday, so maybe, I don't know, the way I talk and ramble, people like that. For the 6 or 8 of you that might actually listen to this regularly. All right, so 6 or 8 is worth it. If I'm helping 6 or 8 dog owners, that to me is worth this time, with all sincerity. All right, so again, don't forget, rate, review, share, subscribe. If you do listen to this and you're not local to Los Angeles and Las Vegas, and as I've mentioned, in Los Angeles, I am phasing more out of the in-person because I'm based more in Las Vegas. Los Angeles, for a lot of reasons I've said in the last episode, is just not going to be good for me long term to be there on a full-time basis, but I am still there for my groups. I will still meet certain people in person, or any clients I'm currently working with, of course. But I am doing online training, Zoom, FaceTime, Skype. They work wonderful. I can demonstrate all this. I can talk your ear off. I can give you all the same information I give people in person. I actually do it a little bit of a less of a cost too, and it allows me to fill in the blanks, because when I'm working, I have to drive from place to place, especially in California, and there's only so many that I can see in a day, where when it comes to the online, I could see back-to-back clients all day long. So that's been allowing me the ability to help more people as well. So please, if you are anywhere, any place, and you have a dog and need help, contact me, dogtrainingla@gmail.com. I am more than happy to schedule an online session with you. Okay, so that's about it. I'm here with Minnie. We're almost at the Nevada-Utah border, headed to Colorado. We got about 8 hours ahead of us. Miss Minnie is sleeping, being such a good little, sweet little baby. I love you. What a good little doggy. She's such a cutie. All right, so, see, I bathed my dog too. That is it. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you all. Train your dog, love your dog. Have a great day.